I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to chat to you today. How are you doing?
Oh, really great. Thank you. And you too. Thanks so much for chatting about this.
I haven't listened to it all, I confess, but I'm already hooked on the first few episodes.
Okay.
For people who
Great.
don't know anything about Unicorn Girl, though, can you give us your own intro? What can people expect if they tune in?
If you listen to Unicorn Girl, which I hope you do, I think it's so hard to give a one line because it's so wild and twisted. And 1 minute you'll think it's going one place, and then you'll think it's another place. And what you think it is not what it is. And it will just take you on a wild journey where you're just asking questions all the time. But I promise by the end of it, all the answers will be revealed. And it's about a woman called Candice, who is a unicorn girl. It very quickly comes to fruition of why it's called Unicorn Girl. And the artwork has a unicorn head that you kind of wear it, I don't know, fancy dress, Halloween, which Candice loved to wear. And it kind of she became like this unicorn girl in many ways, metaphorically, as well. And she goes on this journey to try and do good. But I don't know. Is it real? Is it not? Is she lying? Is it good? Is it bad? And then you start to get to know everybody in her world. And she has a very big world. So it starts in Utah, it builds out to lots of different states in the US, and then it builds out internationally. And you end up in places like Ukraine, Afghanistan, Homeland Security come in at one point, Salt Lake City. It just kind of goes everywhere until maybe you realize that something's not quite as it seems. But it's so hard to describe, Sarah, this show. This is the hardest one, I think, ever to describe.
People just need to start listening.
Just listen. Yeah.
And of course, you had such amazing success with Scamander, not only when it was a podcast, but of course, then it got adapted for the small screen. What do you think the secret to the success of that was? What is it about these stories that I think really hits a chord with people? And what did you want to take from that experience onto your next project?
It's a really good question, because I've thought a lot about that myself. And I'm so grateful for everybody that listened to Scamander, because it was the original OG listeners that helped me make it into a TV show. When you listen to Unicorn Girl, and if you've listened to Scamander, you'll be able to see it's not a coincidence kind of what I've done. I really wanted to focus on women. There are guys in this story, but it's definitely women coming together, friendship, which I think is very fascinating, especially when it comes to potential betrayals in a friendship, which I'm not sure we talk as much about as we do with intimate relationships. But for me, I don't know about you, but for me, some of my friendships where it's not being quite as they've seemed have been so much more painful than my intimate relationships. And I don't know, I feel like there's so much relatability in these stories. And you look at like Scamander and you're like, okay, this woman lied about cancer, right? She infiltrated a community and betrayed a community. Candice, I don't want to give too much away. Candice is Unicorn Girl, and I know we don't know Candice as well as we do Amanda, but you soon will. And with Candice, I feel like messy and complex. Was she trying to do good? Was there a validation? Was there a need for validation, a need for attention, a need for love that motivated these people? And I think that's something that we can all relate to, but we can relate to the other side of, I don't know, being hurt and being betrayed and pain and trauma, dare I say. And I feel like in Unicorn Girl, you kind of have everything. It takes you on like a wild, exciting story, but it makes you question a lot of things too, which I think is really important. I really try not to like force it down people's throat, but actually like give you a journey as if you were kind of part of this story. And I think that's hopefully what works. And that's what I really try and do, rather than being like, okay, this is the story. This is what happened. I want to be like, here's a woman called Amanda. You know, she's a mother of two boys. You know, here's a woman called Candice. Oh, actually, coincidentally, nothing to do with it, but also a mother of two boys. You know, she's in a book group. She's the life and soul of the book group. And I think there's just so many things we can relate to. And I just think, like, as women, you know, we're complex characters, and there's a lot of that in this story, a lot, and I think that's something that we can all relate to, and I think there's a fascination with that because I don't feel like we see. I mean, we're starting to see these like complex female characters now, which I think is really interesting.
And maybe you can just give us a bit of insight into the process, the journey you went on to even produce the show. I mean, I think you heard about her first from the book group, right? But what was it about her story, you know, perhaps things that weren't adding up that made you want to jump on that plane and sort of start this investigation?
Well, you said about the journey. I don't think I've slept for about 2 years. I'm not joking. um, Sometimes I've like woke up in the middle of the night, or like this happens a little bit on Scamander actually, but it's been more on this one, on Unicorn Girl, where I'm just constantly questioning things because what came to fruition really early on this one is, oh, actually, like I'm assuming, and look, this was very early on. Like I never assume. I kind of gather all the information, and then I'm like, okay, that can't be real. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that hang on, that was real, that was true, but then that wasn't. And I think what what Candice did and Unicorn Girl builds on is there's a lot of truth in it. And that's so much harder to distinguish lies when they're based in a foundation of truth. And there's a lot of people she surrounded herself that gave herself a lot of credibility, that why would you not believe what was going on? And actually, are you disbelieving or are you believing? And that's literally the whole concept of this. But what made me really go, like really pursue this was, yes, I did find out about Candice through a book group. I didn't know half of the stuff that I had ended up finding out, but I found her really fascinating as a character. And look, you know, when you listen to Unicorn Girl and you get to the end, you know, she's caused people a lot of pain, but then there's a contradiction because some people would say she actually did good too. And I think that's what's so fascinating. And when I started to like look at her as a woman in this book group, and you know, she used the book group like a diary, and so I could really get to know her. And I just was like, I really want to build off Scamander. And I was like, wow, I don't know what this is yet, but this is so, like, some of the things she was saying just seemed so fantastical. But you watched her videos and you read her posts. Like I said, she used this book group like a diary because it was like a private online book group. This is kind of funny. She's kind of funny. She's a great writer. She compels you massively, but there was a lot of suspicion about what she was actually doing, but I didn't quite know what she was actually doing either. And so I remember phoning my mum up and, you know, giving you so much detail, but like I remember phoning my mum up and being like, I feel like I just need to get on a plane and go and I just be where she is and meet some of these kind of women that I can see around her. But again, the book group was like a private online book group all over the US. And then she was based in Utah. And I don't know, I just had an instinct and a gut feeling. And I got on a plane and I met a couple of women. She gets arrested. and um, and then I went along the journey. And again, it's kind of like very similar to Scamander. It was incredible because I was along for the ride, and that was a really real privilege because I got to sit with a lot of these women as they started to connect for the very first time and realize what had actually been done to them. So I think that's what, you know, you mentioned about what, I don't know, makes these things successful. I feel like I feel like that. I feel like I was able to bring this to you as it happened, and that's the journey I take you on as a listener.
And what I love about it is it does almost have the feel of like unfolding like a thriller. I mean, it's quite hard, isn't it, when you're working with an audio only
Yeah.
format? But you know, the way you're reading out all these social posts, but then you've also got the voices of, you know, her victims, let's say. How do you just decide to piece it all together? And I guess those voices, having those represented was one of the most important parts. So getting their trust and being able to have their voices heard was a really key element.
Absolutely. And you know what, you just made me think when you said, you've made me so happy because you said it listens like a thriller that starts to unfold. That is exactly what it is. And you know what it reminds me of? Like I read a lot of those, like, I'm doing this because I'm thinking of books, you know, those like really amazing, like thriller summer reads where you sit on the beach and you're like, you know, I don't know, like, ooh, what's the next door neighbor doing in this book, you know, like, and that I feel like it is that, it's this summer thriller read that you sit on a beach and you can't stop turning the page, and you've got such compelling, fascinating characters, and that's what it is in a listening podcast format. But you're absolutely right. Like the key to being able to tell this, to tell Unicorn Girl and other stories like this, is trust of the people involved. Because, you know, I can investigate this and I can like put it together and I can like, you know, write it and investigate, but I can't just tell it or really do anything without the trust of the people involved, because there's so much nuance and detail in this story that, I don't know, an emotion that you really need to feel it from the people that were involved. And again, I was really privileged to be able to go on this journey and to spend a lot of time with these people. This was not a retrospective thing. This was not quick sit down and ask a few questions. I spent a lot of time in Utah. And occasionally I'd do like a little tiny post and a few people would guess where I am, because obviously you can't post about anything. And then they're like, you're doing a story in Utah. I'm like, no. um, and yeah, and you spend a lot of time with people. And like, again, you know, I can't do any of this without people's trust. But I do feel like my own lived experience of understanding what it's like to be, I don't know, to really to be in pain and to be hurt and to be betrayed and to be used, I think, I don't know, really plays into it. And yeah, I feel like I'm so grateful for the trust of all the people that are in Unicorn Girl. And they're really a special group of people. Like they've become friends. Like I know I'm supposed to be neutral, and I absolutely am. But at the same time, like I've spent a lot of time with these people and I feel like a connection with them. And I hope that in some way I've helped them along their journey of trying to heal. But it's really empowering too. I know you're not at the end yet, but it's such an empowering story by the end.
I mean, I was thinking about other these sort of true crime, particularly ones that involve, you know, women. And there, as you said at the beginning, there is such complexity to these people, and perhaps it's not as straightforward as, you know, making a judgment. Because even with the Anna Delvey story, or you know, the Dropout series, you know, you do have kind of sympathy at times, and you're wondering, you know, what combination of sort of mental health difficulties versus someone being, you know, a villain, a straightforward villain, is at play here. So, you know, once people have got to the end, what do you hope people will be thinking about or taking away from the story?
It's a really good point. And you know, when I was listening to it, it made me think like, I won't give it away, but I actually coincidentally come into the story in the very last episode. I don't know. It was very hard for me because I really make sure that I don't judge. I think it's so important. It's not for me to judge. It's for me to take you on this journey, to give you everything as a listener or a viewer, and for me to not judge or put something down your throat of what I think. But there was a moment that was very hard for me, because, you know, there was something that Candice represented that happened to me at the same time, and I can't actually still believe it, to be honest. You know, I feel like you're right. I think there is, you'll listen to this and there'll be some parts of you that is just like, oh my God, how could you possibly do that? But it's definitely complicated because there's some people that I spoke to where she has had a good impact or helped with something, but it was maybe done with a bad intention. Does that mean it's good? Does it mean that the work that some of these people did was real, or does it mean that it wasn't real because it was set with bad intention? Did Candice have bad intention? I don't know. Some of her family believe that she always thought she needed and wanted to do good, but then was it to get adoration? And I think we see that on a basic level at social media too sometimes. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing good and being and feeling good about it, because I don't know, that's one of the things around mental health, right, is actually like, helping helps you, but then if your intention is bad, so it's just complicated and there's loads of I think questions around it. But I think you're right. I don't know. I think it's hard because I think in Scamander, some people thought I should have been a little bit harsher, but it's not for me to do that. Like, it's not for me to do that. It's if I do that, then it's not going to be the story that you all hear and that you all see.
I think one of the main things I felt as well is just that kind of red flag that we should all have when consuming any kind of social media, because it somehow does kind of spur these people on because of this, that sort of false image. And we should always be questioning that. So whether it's someone who's obviously using it to this extent, but even just everyday influencers, and I think that's probably also one of the big takeaways.
It is, and it's so hard, right? Because like, why? It's so tiring that we have to question everything as well. So I don't know. I'm always in like split between that. I feel like we shouldn't, I don't know, question everything that we see, because I think that can be quite damaging for us, because then we create this like mistrust and this like hypervigilance, which I don't know, isn't necessarily healthy. But at the same time, you're right, like the way Candice presented herself, there were some red flags, but at the same time, even if you had a red flag, and this is what I think everybody will find very interesting, would you have really questioned it? Because at the same time as you potentially had a red flag, because maybe it is, I don't know, extreme, there's like a moral complexity in this story. At the same time, you would see Candice holding an orphan and it's real, or you'd see her, I don't know, helping somebody on the streets of Salt Lake City, or the next minute you'd see her partnering with somebody, a huge thing, which I won't give away. And so any red flags that you might have are always countered by something that was born in reality and truth. And I think that's what's very hard. So I don't know. I think I'm always conflicted because, we can easily sit here and judge and be like, oh, I would have seen those red flags. But, we're emotional human beings and we want to trust, we want to help, and we want connection. And I think that's something for us all to remember and not blame ourselves. So maybe the takeaway is, yes, to look at these red flags, and also like, what is the stereotype of people that do these things? I mean, if you look at Candice, you would never think for a second, but then I don't know, what does somebody look like that does these things? Are they supposed to look like a certain way? And, Candice was very kind. This is not my opinion. She was very kind to people. She was funny. She was the life and soul. She was engaging. She helped people. She supported people through trauma. But did she take advantage of that at the same time? But I think you're absolutely right. It's really important to look out for like, love bombing, and also to listen to ourselves. I think actually the moral of this story is we don't listen to ourselves when we have gut feelings. A lot of people don't. And even when we do, I don't know, there's some people in this story that they pulled away. How would anybody believe them when Candice was so, I don't know, credible because of the work and the things that she was doing, and she knew a lot of people and she could pull in a lot of high-powered people. It's very hard to question those people.
Yeah, definitely.
I went on a whole, it's such a fascinating topic though.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. I can't wait to binge the rest of it. And of course, can't wait for everyone else to listen to it too. Thanks a lot, Charlie.